Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Kennedy, LeadingRe, with my good friend Eric Bryant with Openn with two N's. Eric, what's going on?
Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year. You're the very first video that I've done this year. So I was eagerly waiting to see you today, and I appreciate you being on the call.
You're the first. I like it.
Before we get going, I guess we have a lot to talk about today, but I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk about Openn. I know you guys, what you do is kind of newer to the ecosystem in prop tech. And I know you can work with agents and or brokers. You prefer to work with brokers. It makes more sense for a lot of reasons, but kind of give us a quick 30-second overview of what Openn does, if you will.
Sure. We're in a space that's been labeled offer management. But in general, what we've done is we've taken the negotiation piece of the transaction or the offer and acceptance piece, and we put it into software. So we've given all the participants, including the consumers, their own dashboard with their own level of permissions to what they can see. And we've opened up the process to everyone involved, cut down on the questions, give them more opportunity to make a quality decision and to work very closely with their agents. I think one of the most important things is, and it's even in our patent, we have a patent in the United States that says there must be an agent included at each end of the process. And very briefly, the reason why we do that, what we found out in Australia is that when you have a professional involved in both sides of the transaction, you have more trust, you have more faith. Because people assume that when you put something in software, some 16-year-old from Russia is going to come in and start messing around with things. They're going to start putting in fake bids, or maybe even, who knows, the listing agent and the seller might be messing around and they're putting in fake bids. But when you have a professional involved, that doesn't happen. So having them in there versus having a peer-to-peer transaction is safety, it's trust, and there's a lot of value to it.
Got it.
And then basically everybody gets a dashboard. They see what's going on. They see where their position is in the process. So if I put in an offer for $500,000, I see where it is in the hierarchy and I understand what my position is. I can see what else is going on. I can make an educated decision as to whether I'm on the right property or not. So even a simple thing like putting it into the software creates a time savings and a conversation between an agent and a buyer, or an agent and a seller. Those questions that normally appear don't, because it's all in front of everybody and they have the answers to it. It's really important. It leads to a lot of different, the transparency itself is the real value for the consumer and the agent, but it leads to things like an improved effort for diversity, equity, and inclusion and fair housing. Because when you put this transaction, when you put the negotiation, when you put the offer and acceptance into software, you level the playing field for everybody, because the software shows clearly that everybody was treated fairly, everybody was treated the same, and if someone's treated different, the software will show that as well. So everybody can feel comfortable participating in the process, even from a diversity, equity, and inclusion position.
Okay. So, I mean, transparency is key, which is great. Obviously, there's a feel-good benefit to diversity, equality, and fair housing, and all of that.
Yeah.
As sometimes my experience, maybe you've experienced this too, is agents don't like giving up, maybe being too transparent or giving up some information or some control because there's some fear-based there. Have you experienced that as well?
Oh, absolutely. The fear is the number one obstacle to get over. Right, because there's a feeling amongst some of the agents and some of the brokers as well that if I'm providing a service of negotiation, that's what I do. That's part of my professional. That's part of what I do in the process. Mm-hmm. And if I give it up, if I allow people to see what's going on, then I'm diminishing my position somehow. But that's not the case. It's actually the opposite. What we've found in the past is the brokers, the agents who step out on a limb and say, you know what, I know in my heart, I know in my gut that this is the right thing to do. It's funny because no matter how many agents and brokers we talk to, they'll say, well, if I'm representing the seller, I want to hide everything. But if I'm representing the buyer, I want everything to be open. Right. So it's like you've got this dichotomy of thought processes. But by allowing the consumer to have what they desire and what they deserve in the process, it makes it much more comfortable for them. They remember where that comfortability came from, who the agent was, who the broker was. It leads to a relationship that is absolutely solid and leads to further sales and referrals, because they tell all their friends, look, I was provided with an experience at this brokerage that I couldn't get anywhere else. You need to experience it as well, because it's really, I mean, even as we sit here today, the younger generations, the largest generation of buyers, right, are down in the 35-year-old range. These people have grown up on technology. They are absolutely blown away when they get into a negotiation for their first house and they have to get a FedEx package or a PDF attached to something. They have to look at them separately, side by side, what's going on here? I don't understand it. They're blown away by it and they hate it. And so when we provide this service, or when anyone in the space provides this service to a consumer, they gravitate, right? It's no different than Amazon. It's no different than Uber. It's no different than any other software that changed an industry. Our software is the same thing. When the early adopters, we'll call them, in Australia, which is where we came from, by the way. I didn't say that in my opening, but we've been in Australia for 7 years. We came to North America in the end of 2021. In Australia, we have data that shows the early adopters jumped in, provided the consumers with what they wanted, and they increased their market share, some of them from 8% to 30%, because people gravitate, right? You and I, if we experience something that's more beneficial, that's faster, that's less expensive, whatever the motivation might be, we're driven to go to that. We're driven to that. Well, that's what's happening with technology. So we got to get past this fear, because the fear is absolutely wrong. It's totally on the wrong side of reality.
Well, it feels like, if you remember back in the day, I know you're probably pretty young, they used to have listing books, right? When they used to go in, all the listings were in a book with photography.
I use that all the time, man. That's when I got my license.
There was pushback from the agents of putting those online where everyone could get access to these listings, because they felt they were losing control and they weren't in the middle of it anymore. And that wasn't true. And I feel like this is just the next iteration of that, where I get when it's your livelihood and you bring a certain set of benefits to your client, one of those being negotiation, how it could look or feel like, oh, I'm giving this up. But the reality is you're still very, very included. You guys are always going to include the agent. So at the end of it, if it makes it more fair and easier and the experience is better for your client and you're still involved as an agent, there isn't really a downside. Because to your point earlier, these people that are buying, that are in their 20s and 30s, everything's online, everything's transparent, everything's upfront. They don't remember ever there being a point in time where there was no Google or internet. That's their entire life. There's always been internet. That's just the way that it is. So it's very different from how we grew up. So I don't really see a downside. And from a broker standpoint, because if you're watching this, you're probably a broker. Again, better experience for the client. Awesome. Good. It's a win. And also, the best offer is going to be accepted. That's a win. But equally important is there's some mitigation of any lawsuits downstream, that if someone feels like they were hindered by an equality issue or fair housing issue, not only do you have documentation of exactly what happened, but if they were to sue you, because people can sue anybody, anytime, for any reason in the United States, you can go and say, fair housing is so important to me that we've invested in this software to help mitigate this problem. Maybe this slipped through, maybe it didn't. We can have that conversation, but you're going to be different than 99.2% of the people in your area that don't have that software. So there's a win across the board, and it's not expensive. It's not cost prohibitive. So I think there's a lot of wins there. And to loop this thing all around, fear, there's a lot of fear in the market right now, buyers and sellers and agents and mortgage, and everybody's kind of watching 2023 to see what's going to happen. And usually fear is based on something that doesn't actually come to fruition, right? Usually it's that. So be smart, make decisions that you have to make, but if you can mitigate that and give a better experience to your client, that's a easy win in my book.
Yeah, you nailed it with the data issue, right? To put something into software means we have the data. And when we have the data, all you have to do is push a button and we can create a report that shows how everything was handled. Every offer was submitted to the seller and the seller read it, right? I mean, that's data, that's powerful data.
Yeah.
If I'm a broker, I hand that report to a litigator, I'm good. Unless, of course, it shows, which it will, that something went wrong. And then what do we have? We have an educational opportunity or maybe a disciplinary opportunity. But the fact that it's in that software allows us the ability to use that data that we needed. And I'll give you a really good story. In any market, the software has value. In a market like we're experiencing right now, days on market are an incredibly important item, right? When you put this into software, the statistics show that days on market can go down from 120 to 28.
Wow.
Just because you put it in. And the reason, I think the reason is, and the reason that we've come up with is, if you're looking at 10 different listings and one of them stands out because it's automated and it's completed the electronic transaction, you're drawn to it. For example, you can take our data, we push it back to you, you put it on your listing, on your detail page on your website, and it shows currently there are 2 offers, the highest of which is, XYZ 510,000. You start to look at 10 different listings on a site, one of them stands out because it's pushing back data from Openn that shows there's something going on over here. So it draws people to that particular listing. Then that listing has activity, people get involved, something happens. So at any point in time, there's many, many pieces of this software that are beneficial for every marketplace.
Well, I'm going to tag you in this post. So if you're interested in learning more, are there any geographical limitations? Or are you guys national?
Well, national all the way. In fact, we're in Canada as well. So
awesome. Well, I'll tag you on this.
In Canada.
If you're a broker interested in learning more, reach out to Eric directly. They got a whole team of people. It's not like they're just getting into the US market. They're already here and doing well, which is why they're part of the Solutions Group program of LeadingRe. And we appreciate your time and your partnership. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. It's been great.
We'll see you.
All right, bye.